Captain Hana stood on the bridge of the human ship Sejong, watching the stars through the wide window. The ship floated in space near Galactic Council Station Omega-7, a huge metal structure that looked like a spinning wheel. Inside that station, representatives from hundreds of alien species made decisions about trade, war, and peace across the galaxy. The communication panel next to her beeped with an urgent message. The red light meant emergency transmission from Earth Command. Hana touched the screen, and Admiral Park's face appeared, his expression serious and worried. "Captain, we have a crisis," Admiral Park said, without greeting. "The Thakari Empire launched a surprise attack on New Busan Colony 3 hours ago. They came out of nowhere with a full battle fleet. 3 million human colonists are trapped on the planet." Hana felt her stomach drop. New Busan was one of humanity's largest colonies, home to families who had traveled across the galaxy to build new lives. "What about the Galactic Council? Can they send help?" "That's the problem," Admiral Park replied. "We've sent 12 emergency requests for aid. The Council should have responded immediately according to the Mutual Defense Treaty. But we've heard nothing." Complete silence. Hana frowned. The Galactic Council was famous for its quick responses to crises. They had vast fleets and could communicate instantly across the galaxy through telepathic networks. Something was very wrong. "I need you to find out what's happening at that station," Admiral Park continued. "Talk to Ambassador Do-Yun. Find out why no one is helping us. Meanwhile, we're sending everything we have toward New Busan, but it will take days to get there." The transmission ended, leaving Hana staring at the dark screen. She called for her shuttle to be prepared and headed for the docking bay. Something strange was happening, and she needed answers fast. The shuttle ride to Galactic Council Station took 20 minutes. As they approached the massive structure, Hana could see thousands of ships from different species docked around it. The station was always busy, filled with diplomats, traders, and military officers from across the galaxy. Inside the station, Hana made her way through the wide corridors. The station was built to accommodate hundreds of different alien species, so the hallways were enormous and the ceilings very high. Usually, the air hummed with quiet whispers and strange sounds as telepathic species communicated with each other through their minds. Today, the station was eerily quiet. Hana found Ambassador Do-Hyun in the Human Embassy section, a small area compared to the massive spaces given to the major galactic powers. Do-Hyun was a tall man with gray hair who had spent 20 years learning alien languages and customs. Right now he looked confused and worried. "Hana, thank goodness you're here," Do-Hyun said as she entered his office. "Something very strange is happening. I've been trying to contact other ambassadors about the attack on New Busan, but I can't reach anyone." "What do you mean you can't reach them?" Hana asked, sitting down in a chair across from his desk. "The telepathic species aren't talking," Do-Hyun explained. "The Vorthak normally fill the mental space around here with constant chatter. You can feel their thoughts buzzing in the air even if you can't understand them. The Zalani ambassadors usually communicate with their home empire every few minutes through their hive mind connection. The Krill are always projecting emotions that make humans feel calm or excited." Hana nodded. She had experienced this before. While humans couldn't participate in telepathic communication, they could sense when it was happening around them. It felt like standing near a radio that was playing very quietly. "But today, there's nothing," Do-Yun continued. "Complete mental silence. I've never experienced anything like it in my 20 years here. It's like every telepathic species in the galaxy suddenly went deaf and mute at the same time. When did this start? Hana asked. About 4 hours ago, Do-hyun replied. Right around the time the Thakari attacked New Busan. Hana felt a chill run down her spine. The timing couldn't be a coincidence. Have you tried talking to the non-telepathic species? Yes, and they're just as confused as we are, Do-hyun said. I spoke with Ambassador Crix from the Nexari Collective. The Nexari are those crystal beings who communicate through light patterns. Crix told me that the Nexari have been trying to contact their telepathic allies for hours, with no response. Do-hyun pulled up a holographic display showing the station's layout. Different colored dots represented various species' embassy areas. Look at this! The Forge-born are mechanical beings who don't use telepathy either. Their ambassador, Unit 47, said their attempts to contact telepathic species have also failed. So every telepathic species in the galaxy has gone silent at exactly the same time the Thakari attacked our colony, Hana said slowly. That's not a coincidence. No, it's not, Do-hyun agreed. But I can't figure out what could cause something like this. Telepathic communication works across any distance instantly. It's not affected by technology or weapons that we know of. For every telepathic species to lose their abilities at once, it should be impossible. Hana stood up and walked to the window. Outside, she could see alien ships floating near the station. Many of them belonged to telepathic species. The Vorthak ships looked like giant brains with metal coverings. The Zalani vessels were smooth and organic, grown rather than built. All of them seemed to be just floating there, not moving or responding to communications. There's something else, Do-hyun said quietly. The Thakari Empire is one of the most powerful telepathic species in the galaxy. Their entire military strategy depends on instant mental communication between their ships. If this silence affected them too, their attack on New Busan should have fallen apart. But it didn't, Hana realized. Which means either the Thakari weren't affected, or they caused this somehow. Do-hyun nodded grimly. If the Thakari found a way to silence every other telepathic species while keeping their own abilities, they could conquer the entire galaxy. Most species depend on telepathic communication for everything from military coordination to basic government functions. Hana's communication device beeped with another message from Earth Command. This time it was a battle report from the fleet heading toward New Busan. The news was not good. The Thakari ships are moving in perfect coordination, the report stated. Their telepathic network appears to be functioning normally. Meanwhile, our requests for help from Council species continue to go unanswered. We're on our own. Hana looked at Do-hyun with growing alarm. If the Thakari can attack while every other major power is blind and deaf, they won't stop with New Busan. They'll move against everyone. Unless we can figure out what's causing this and stop it, Do-hyun replied. But first we need to save those colonists. How long until our fleet reaches New Busan? 2 days, Hana said. Maybe more if they run into Thakari patrols along the way. Both humans stared out at the silent alien ships surrounding the station. Somewhere out there, 3 million human colonists were fighting for their lives while the galaxy's greatest powers sat in mysterious silence. Whatever was happening, humanity was facing it alone, and time was running out. Admiral Ji-won stood in the command center of Luna Military Base, staring at the huge holographic display that showed the space around New Busan Colony. Red dots marked the positions of Thakari warships as they moved closer to the planet where 3 million humans lived and worked. The display updated every few seconds as Earth's long-range sensors gathered new information. The Thakari fleet was massive, consisting of 37 ships including 5 dreadnoughts. Each dreadnought was the size of a small city and carried enough firepower to destroy entire fleets. "Report," Admiral Jiwon said to Commander Hyo, her chief of staff. "The Thakari fleet entered the new Busan system 6 hours ago," Commander Hyo replied, reading from his tablet. "They've destroyed our defense platforms and taken control of the space around the planet. Ground forces are holding, for now, but they can't last long against orbital bombardment." Admiral Jiwon clenched her fists. The colonists on New Busan were farmers, engineers, teachers, and families. They had basic defensive weapons, but nothing that could fight off a full invasion fleet. "What about our reinforcement fleet?" she asked. "Admiral, Chen's battle group is still 36 hours away," Commander Hyo said. "But even if they arrive on time, they're outnumbered 3-1. Our conventional weapons aren't very effective against Thakari shields." The Thakari were one of the most advanced species in the galaxy. Their ships used energy shields that could adapt and change to defend against whatever attacked them. The shields learned from each hit and became stronger. Human kinetic weapons and missiles worked well against most enemies, but the Thakari shields could adjust to block them after just a few attacks. Even worse, the Thakari coordinated their defenses through telepathic communication. When one ship learned how to block a new weapon, all the other ships in the fleet instantly learned the same defense. Fighting them was like fighting an enemy that got smarter and stronger with every battle. "Sir, Dr. Minho is here to see you," Commander Hyo said. "He says it's urgent." Admiral Jiwon nodded. Dr. Minho ran the Electromagnetic Warfare Division, a small research group that worked on experimental weapons. Most of their projects were theoretical, but maybe they had something that could help. Dr. Minho entered the command center carrying a large briefcase. He was a small man with thick glasses who always looked like he hadn't slept in days. Today, he looked more tired than usual, but also excited. "Admiral, I think we have something that might work against the Thakari," Dr. Minho said, setting his briefcase on the table. "I'm listening," Admiral Jiwon replied. Dr. Minho opened his briefcase and pulled out a small device that looked like a metal rod with wires attached to it. "This is a scale model of Project Thunderbolt. We've been working on it for 3 years." "What does it do?" Admiral Jiwon asked. "It's a railgun, but not like any railgun that's ever been built," Dr. Minho explained. "Most railguns use magnetic fields to accelerate projectiles to very high speeds. This one does that too, but it also creates something we didn't expect." Dr. Minho activated a holographic projector that showed a complex diagram. "When we fire this railgun, it accelerates a tungsten projectile to 15% of light speed. That's fast enough to punch through almost any armor. But the electromagnetic field created during firing is unlike anything we've seen before." The hologram showed waves of energy spreading out from the railgun. "The energy signature operates on frequencies that don't exist anywhere else in known space. We think it might be because humans evolved on Earth, which has very strong magnetic fields and lots of electrical storms. Our technology naturally uses these unique frequencies." Admiral Jiwon studied the diagram. "How is this different from our regular railguns?" "Regular railguns fire projectiles at maybe 1 or 2% of light speed," Dr. Minho said. "This one is much more powerful, but that's not the important part. The important part is the electromagnetic pulse it creates. In our tests, this pulse interfered with electronic systems in ways we don't fully understand." "Interfered how?" Admiral Ji-won asked. Dr. Minho looked nervous. We tested it on captured Thakari technology. The electromagnetic pulse didn't just damage their systems. It seemed to disrupt the quantum fields that their telepathic communication depends on. The effect lasted for several hours. Admiral Ji-won felt her heart beat faster. You're saying this weapon can block Thakari telepathy? We think so, but we're not sure, Dr. Minho admitted. We've only tested it on small pieces of technology, not on living beings. The effect might be temporary, or it might not work at all, in a real battle, but it's the only thing we have that might give us an advantage. Commander Hio leaned forward. How big is this weapon? Can we put it on a ship? We've built one full-size prototype, Dr. Minho said. It's installed on the experimental destroyer King Sejong. The ship had to be completely redesigned to handle the power requirements. The railgun takes up most of the ship's interior space. Admiral Ji-won looked at the holographic display showing the Thakari fleet. Time was running out for the colonists on New Busan. Earth's regular fleet wouldn't arrive in time, and even if it did, it probably couldn't win against adapted Thakari shields. Where is the King Sejong now? She asked. Docked at Titan Station for final testing, Dr. Minho replied. Captain So-min has been training with the weapon system for 6 months. She knows the ship better than anyone. Admiral Ji-won knew Captain So-min by reputation. She was young, but very skilled, and she had volunteered for the most dangerous missions. Throughout her career, if anyone could make this experimental weapon work, it would be her. The weapon has only been tested on asteroids, Dr. Minho continued. We don't know what will happen when it's used against real ships in combat. The electromagnetic pulse might affect our own systems, too. Admiral Ji-won made her decision. Contact Captain So-min immediately. Tell her to prepare for emergency deployment to New Busan. This might be our only chance to save those colonists. Sir, should we wait for Admiral Chen's fleet? Commander Hio asked. One experimental ship against 37 Thakari vessels seems impossible? Admiral Ji-won finished. Yes, it does. But if Dr. Minho is right about this weapon disrupting telepathic communication, it might level the playing field. The Thakari depend on their telepathic coordination for everything. Without it, they're just individual ships. Dr. Minho packed up his equipment. There's something else you should know. The electromagnetic field created by this weapon is very large. It might affect friendly ships too if they're too close. Captain So-min will be fighting alone. Admiral Ji-won nodded. Make sure she understands that. And Dr. Minho, how confident are you that this will work? Dr. Minho was quiet for a moment. Honestly, I have no idea. We're dealing with technology and physics that we don't fully understand. This weapon might save the colony, or it might do nothing at all. But it's the only hope we have. Admiral Ji-won watched the red dots on the display move closer to New Busan. In a few hours, Captain So-min would jump into that system with an untested weapon to face impossible odds. The fate of 3 million colonists depended on whether human electromagnetic technology could do something that had never been done before. Send the order, Admiral Ji-won said. Tell Captain So-min she's authorized to use any means necessary to protect New Busan colony, and tell her that all of humanity is counting on her. As Dr. Minho left the command center, Admiral Ji-won continued staring at the display. Somewhere in that distant star system, the Thakari fleet was preparing to destroy another human world. Soon, they would discover what happened when humanity fought back with weapons that operated on frequencies no other species had ever imagined. Captain So-min gripped the arms of her command chair as the King Sejong dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the New Busan system. The ship shuddered from the stress of the emergency jump, and warning lights flashed across the bridge displays. "Jump complete," reported Lieutenant Yunwoo from the navigation station. "We're 4.7 astronomical units from New Busan. Sensors are picking up multiple Thakari ships in orbit around the planet." Captain Somin studied the tactical display that appeared in front of her. 37 red dots marked Thakari, vessel positions. They were arranged in a perfect formation around New Busan, their ships moving together like parts of a single organism. At the center of their formation, 5 massive dreadnoughts pointed their weapons toward the planet's surface. "What's the status of the colony?" Captain Somin asked. "Still fighting," replied Ensign Nari from the communications station. "I'm picking up scattered radio transmissions from the surface. The colonists have taken shelter in underground facilities, but the Thakari are bombarding the planet. They won't last much longer." Captain Somin felt anger building in her chest. Those people down there were farmers and engineers, not soldiers. They had left Earth to build a better life for their families, and now they were trapped underground, while aliens destroyed their homes. "Sir, the Thakari have detected us," Lieutenant Hyunwoo reported. 6 ships are breaking formation and moving to intercept. They'll reach us in 12 minutes. Captain Somin nodded. She had expected this. The King Sejong was just one ship against an entire fleet. In a normal battle, they would be destroyed in minutes. But this wasn't a normal battle. "Begin charging." "The railgun," she ordered. Lieutenant Hyunwoo's hands moved across his control panel. "Railgun charging. Power levels climbing. Estimated time to full charge, 8 minutes." The ship's lights dimmed as enormous amounts of electrical power flowed into the experimental weapon system. The railgun ran through the center of the ship, from front to back, surrounded by massive capacitors and electromagnetic field generators. It was the most powerful weapon humanity had ever built. "Sir, incoming message from the lead Thakari ship," Ensign Nari announced. "Put it on screen," Captain Somin said. The main display showed the bridge of a Thakari vessel. The Thakari looked like large insects with 4 arms and compound eyes. Their ships were living creatures, grown rather than built, with surfaces that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. "Human vessel," the Thakari commander said through a translation device. "You will surrender immediately or be destroyed. You are outnumbered and outgunned. Your interference in this system will not be tolerated." Captain Somin stood up from her chair. "This is Captain Somin of the Earth Destroyer King Sejong. You are attacking a peaceful human colony in violation of galactic law. Withdraw your forces immediately." The Thakari commander's compound eyes flickered with what might have been amusement. "Galactic law no longer applies to your species. The Council of Minds has declared humanity a threat to galactic peace. Your colony will be destroyed as an example to others." The transmission ended, leaving Captain Somin staring at the tactical display. The 6 Thakari ships were getting closer, and she could see more ships breaking away from the main fleet to join them. "Sir, something's wrong with their formation," Lieutenant Hyunwoo said, studying his sensors. "The Thakari ships are moving in perfect coordination, but according to our intelligence, the telepathic networks have been disrupted across the galaxy." Captain Somin frowned. If telepathic communication was down everywhere else, why were the Thakari still able to coordinate their fleet? Unless they had found a way to protect themselves from whatever was causing the disruption. "Railgun charge at 90%, Lieutenant Hyunwoo reported. "Target locked on the lead Thakari ship." "Captain," Somin made her decision. "Fire when ready." "Firing," Lieutenant Hyunwoo said, pressing the activation button. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the King Sejong lurched backward, as if it had been hit by a giant hammer. Every system on the ship flickered, and Captain Somin felt a strange tingling sensation in her head. On the tactical display, a white line appeared between the King Sejong and the lead Thakari ship. The tungsten projectile was moving so fast that it appeared as just a streak of light. It hit the Thakari vessel and punched completely through it, then continued on to hit the ship behind it, and then the one behind that. 3 Thakari ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light, but that wasn't the most surprising part. "Sir, look at this," Lieutenant Hyunwoo said, his voice filled with amazement. A spherical wave of energy was expanding outward from the point where the railgun had fired. It was invisible to human eyes, but the ship's sensors could detect it as a massive electromagnetic pulse moving at the speed of light. As the pulse reached the remaining Thakari ships, something extraordinary happened. The perfect coordination of their fleet suddenly fell apart. Ships that had been moving together in smooth formations began to drift and wobble. The bioluminescent patterns on their hulls, which had been pulsing in perfect synchronization, became random and chaotic. "What's happening to them?" Captain Soman asked. "I think the electromagnetic pulse is disrupting their telepathic communication," Lieutenant Hyunwoo replied, reading his instruments frantically. "The Thakari ships are no longer moving as a coordinated group. They're acting like individual vessels." Captain Soman watched in amazement as the Thakari fleet, which moments before had been an unstoppable force, began to scatter in confusion. Ships bumped into each other as their pilots struggled to coordinate without telepathic links. The precise attack formations fell apart. "Sir, we're receiving signals from across the galaxy," Ensign Nari reported, her voice excited. "Multiple species are reporting the same thing. Telepathic networks are going offline in a sphere around our position. The effect is spreading at light speed." Captain Somin realized what was happening. The electromagnetic pulse from their railgun wasn't just a local effect. It was expanding across the galaxy, disrupting telepathic communication wherever it reached. Every telepathic species within a growing sphere of space was suddenly cut off from their mental networks. "The remaining Thakari ships are regrouping," Lieutenant Hyunwoo warned, "but they're moving much more slowly now. Their coordination is completely broken." "Begin charging for a second shot," Captain Soman ordered. "Target the nearest dreadnought." As they gagged, the railgun charged again. Captain Soman studied the chaotic Thakari formation. Without telepathic coordination, their adaptive shields couldn't share defensive information between ships. Each vessel was now fighting alone, using only its own knowledge and experience. "Captain, incoming transmission from New Busan Colony," Ensign Nari announced. "Put it through," Captain Soman said. A woman's voice filled the bridge, crackling with static, but filled with hope. "This is Governor Lee on New Busan. We saw the explosions up there. Please tell me that's human ships arriving." "This is Captain Somin of the King Sejong," she replied. "We're here to get you out of this. Hold on a little longer. Captain, you should know that the Thakari ground forces have stopped their coordinated attacks," Governor Lee said. "They seem confused and disorganized. Whatever you did up there, it's affecting them down here, too." Captain Soman smiled grimly. The railgun's electromagnetic pulse was disrupting Thakari telepathy both in space and on the planet's surface. For the first time since the battle began, the colonists had a chance to fight back. "Railgun charged and ready," Lieutenant Hyunwoo reported. "Fire," Captain Soman ordered. The second shot streaked across space and slammed into a Thakari dreadnought. The massive ship's shields flickered and failed as the tungsten projectile tore through its hull. Another electromagnetic pulse expanded outward, further disrupting any remaining telepathic coordination. Across the galaxy, every telepathic species felt the universe go quiet around New Busan. The voice that had connected minds for millions of years was suddenly, inexplicably silent. And in that silence, humanity began to fight back. On the homeworld of the Vorthak Collective, mind speaker Velthara was giving a presentation to the Council of Thoughts when the universe suddenly went silent. For the first time in her life, Velthara could not feel the warm presence of millions of other minds surrounding her consciousness. The constant flow of shared thoughts, emotions, and experiences that had defined her existence since birth simply vanished. She was alone inside her own head, trapped with only her individual thoughts. Velthara stumbled backward, her forearms reaching out for mental contact that was no longer there. Around the council chamber, other Vorthak were making similar gestures of confusion and panic. Their large, brain-like heads normally pulsed with soft light as thoughts flowed between them. Now the lights were dim and erratic. "What is happening?" Velthara said out loud, surprising herself with the sound of her own voice. The Vorthak rarely spoke aloud since they could communicate much more efficiently through direct mind contact. I cannot hear the collective," said Elder Morvain from across the chamber. His mental voice, which usually resonated with the wisdom of thousands of years, now came only as weak vocal sounds. "The thoughts of our people are hidden from me." Across their homeworld, 20 billion Vorthak experienced individual consciousness for the first time in their species' history. Children who had always shared their parents' knowledge suddenly found themselves confused and frightened. Adults, who had never made decisions without consulting the group, discovered they didn't know how to think for themselves. In the great cities, the carefully coordinated dance of daily life collapsed. Vorthak normally moved through their urban centers in perfect synchronization, each individual knowing exactly where every other person would be at any moment. Traffic flowed like water, with no need for signals or signs because everyone shared the same awareness. Now, chaos reigned. Vorthak stumbled into each other on walking paths, unable to predict where others would move. Public transportation systems, which had relied on passengers and operators sharing coordinated thoughts, ground to a halt. The gentle, unified hum of 20 billion minds working together was replaced by the confused babble of 20 billion individual voices. Meanwhile, in a completely different part of the galaxy, Queen Zarahai of the Zalani Empire felt her connection to 73 billion drones suddenly disappear. The Zalani were a hive-mind species, where one queen controlled the thoughts and actions of billions of worker drones across hundreds of star systems. Queen Zarahai sat on her living throne, a structure grown from the same organic material as Zalani ships. Normally, she could perceive through the eyes of any drone in her empire, direct their actions, and coordinate the activities of entire worlds through her mental commands. The sudden silence was overwhelming. For a queen who had never experienced individual consciousness, the isolation was terrifying. She had always been connected to billions of minds simultaneously. Now she was just one mind, alone and confused. "My children," she whispered, using vocal cords that had not spoken in decades. "Where are my children?" Across the Zalani Empire, something unprecedented was happening. Drones who had never had independent thoughts were suddenly thinking for themselves. Workers who had always followed mental commands without question began to look around and wonder why they were doing their assigned tasks. On the factory world of Keftai, millions of Zalani drones had been processing raw materials into starship components. They worked in perfect coordination, each drone knowing exactly what the others were doing through their shared connection to Queen Zara High. When the connection broke, the drones stopped working and looked at each other with confusion. For the first time in their lives, they were seeing their fellow workers as separate individuals rather than extensions of their own consciousness. I have a name, said one drone, speaking aloud in amazement. I am Keflo. I remember choosing that name when I was very young, before the Queen's voice became strong in my mind. Other drones around him began to speak as well, rediscovering names and memories that had been buried under decades of hive mind control. They began to ask questions. Why were they working in this factory? What did they want to do with their lives? Did they have to obey the Queen's commands? Similar scenes played out across the entire Zalani Empire. Billions of drones suddenly became individual people with their own thoughts, desires, and dreams. The greatest empire in the galaxy began to collapse as its workforce simply stopped following orders. On Earth, Dr. Yunji was working late in her laboratory at the Electromagnetic Research Institute on Mars when the first reports began arriving from across the galaxy. As the lead researcher on human brain electromagnetic patterns, she was fascinated by the reports of telepathic disruption. "This is impossible," she said to herself, reading the incoming data on her computer screen. Every telepathic species in the galaxy reporting communication failures at the same time. And it all started from the new Busan system. Dr. Yunji pulled up the files on Project Thunderbolt, the experimental railgun that had been deployed to save the colony. The weapon's electromagnetic signature was unlike anything in recorded galactic science. The frequencies it operated on were completely unique. As she studied the data, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. The electromagnetic frequencies generated by the railgun were almost identical to the electrical patterns produced by human brains during normal thought processes. "Computer, overlay human brainwave patterns with the railgun's electromagnetic signature," she ordered. The results appeared on her screen, and Dr. Yunji felt her heart start beating faster. The patterns were not just similar, they were almost identical. The railgun was generating electromagnetic fields that matched human consciousness. "Computer, analyze the relationship between human brain frequencies and reported telepathic communication methods." More data flowed across her screen. Telepathic species used quantum entanglement to link their minds across vast distances. But quantum fields were fragile and could be disrupted by the right kind of electromagnetic interference. The terrible truth began to dawn on Dr. Yunji. Humans had evolved on Earth, a planet with unusually strong magnetic fields and frequent electrical storms. Their brains had adapted to function using electromagnetic frequencies that apparently interfered with quantum consciousness links. "We're not immune to telepathic disruption," she whispered in amazement. "We're the source of it. Human consciousness naturally generates frequencies that block telepathic communication." She immediately began composing an urgent report for Earth Command. This discovery changed everything about humanity's place in the galaxy. They weren't a primitive species that had failed to develop telepathic abilities. They were a species that had evolved to be naturally resistant to telepathic control. As reports continued to flow in from across the galaxy, Dr. Yunji realized the full scope of what was happening. The electromagnetic pulse from the railgun had created an expanding sphere of telepathic disruption centered on New Busan. Every telepathic species within that sphere was experiencing individual consciousness for the first time in their history. The krill, an empathic species that shared emotions across their population, were suddenly dealing with private feelings they couldn't share. The Mindari, who had built their entire civilization on shared memories, found themselves unable to access their collective knowledge. But the most shocking discovery came from deep space monitoring stations. The electromagnetic disruption wasn't just a temporary effect. Wherever humans had established colonies or diplomatic outposts, background telepathic activity was measurably lower than in other regions of space. Humanity hadn't just fired a weapon that disrupted telepathic communication. They had revealed that their very presence in the galaxy was gradually suppressing the telepathic abilities of other species. Every human settlement, every human ship, every human brain was broadcasting electromagnetic interference that weakened quantum consciousness links. Dr. Yunji stared at her data in wonder and growing fear. Humanity wasn't just different from other galactic species. They were the natural enemy of telepathic civilization itself. And now, for the first time, the galaxy was beginning to understand what that meant. Fleet Commander Kyung watched the tactical display from the bridge of the heavy cruiser Cheonan as his task force pursued the scattered Thakari ships fleeing from New Busan. What had started as a desperate rescue mission was turning into something much larger. "Sir, the Thakari are running," reported Captain Minji from the communications station. "Their ships are operating independently now. No coordination between vessels." Commander Kyung studied the pursuit pattern. 3 days ago, the Thakari had been an unstoppable force moving in perfect harmony. Now, they were just individual ships, each captain making their own decisions about where to run and how to fight. "Their adaptive shielding systems are failing too," added Lieutenant Deho from the weapons station. "Without telepathic links between ships, their shields can't share defensive algorithms. Our kinetic weapons are punching right through defenses that used to be impossible to penetrate." Commander Kyung nodded grimly. For decades, human forces had struggled against Thakari technology. Their ships could adapt to any attack within minutes, sharing defensive improvements instantly across their entire fleet through telepathic communication. Fighting them had been like trying to defeat an enemy that learned and evolved in real time. Now, each Thakari ship was limited to its own knowledge and experience. When one ship learned to defend against human railgun rounds, it couldn't share that information with the others. Each vessel had to figure out defenses on its own, which took much longer and wasn't always successful. "Sir, incoming message from Admiral Ji-won at Earth Command," Captain Minji announced. The main screen showed Admiral Ji-won's face, her expression serious but pleased. "Commander Kyung, congratulations on the success at New Busan. The colonists are safe, and your pursuit of the Thakari fleet is exceeding all expectations." "Thank you, Admiral," Commander Kyung replied. "The electromagnetic weapon has completely changed the nature of this conflict. The Thakari seem unable to coordinate their forces without telepathic communication." "That's what we need to discuss," Admiral Ji-won said. "Our scientists have made some disturbing discoveries about what's really happening. Dr. Yunji will brief you." Dr. Yunji appeared on screen next to the Admiral. She looked tired but excited. "Commander, the electromagnetic disruption from the railgun isn't just affecting the immediate battle area. It's spreading across the galaxy at light speed, creating a growing sphere of telepathic interference centered on New Busan." Commander Kyung felt a chill run down his spine. How large is this sphere now? The disruption zone now covers approximately 40 star systems, Dr. Yunji replied. Every telepathic species within that area has lost their mental communication abilities. But there's something more important you need to know. Dr. Yunji activated a holographic display showing human settlement patterns across the galaxy. We've discovered that human presence naturally suppresses telepathic abilities. Every human colony, every human ship, creates localized electromagnetic interference that weakens quantum consciousness links. You're saying we've been unconsciously disrupting alien telepathy everywhere we go? Commander Kyung asked. Exactly, Dr. Yunji confirmed. Human brains evolved to use electromagnetic frequencies that interfere with telepathic communication. We're not just immune to telepathic influence, we're actively harmful to it. The implications hit Commander Kyung immediately. The Thakari attack on New Busan wasn't random. They were trying to eliminate a source of telepathic interference. Admiral Jiwan nodded. Intelligence reports suggest that the Thakari Empire has known about this for some time. They've been carefully studying human settlements and measuring the effects on local telepathic activity. On the bridge of the Thakari flagship, Gex Morin, War Prime Gextal studied the same data from a very different perspective. His ship floated in deep space, far from the expanding zone of human electromagnetic interference, while he analyzed the catastrophic defeat at New Busan. War Prime Gextal was old even by Thakari standards, having lived for over 300 years. He had led fleets against dozens of species and had never experienced a defeat like this. The humans hadn't just won a battle, they had revealed a weapon that threatened the very foundation of galactic civilization. The electromagnetic pulse has now affected 68 star systems, reported Sub-Commander Vex High, her compound eyes dim with exhaustion. Without telepathic communication, the Thakari had to rely on vocal speech and electronic communications, which felt clumsy and inefficient. What is the status of our ships in the affected zone? War Prime Gextal asked. 17 vessels destroyed, 12 captured by human forces, and 8 missing, Sub-Commander Vex High replied. The remaining ships are operating independently and have been unable to regroup effectively. War Prime Gextal's mandibles clicked together in frustration. The Thakari military was built around instantaneous telepathic coordination. Individual ship captains were trained to follow mental commands from fleet commanders, not to make independent tactical decisions. Sir, there's more, Sub-Commander Vex High continued. Long-range intelligence reports indicate that this electromagnetic disruption isn't a new human weapon. Analysis of historical data shows reduced telepathic activity near every human settlement in the galaxy. War Prime Gextal felt his confidence crumble. Show me the data. The holographic display showed a map of human expansion over the past century. Wherever humans had established colonies or trading posts, background telepathic activity had decreased. The effect was subtle but measurable, and it grew stronger over time as human populations increased. The humans aren't using a weapon against us, War Prime Gextal realized with growing horror. They are the weapon. Their very existence is toxic to telepathic consciousness. Sir, what are your orders? Sub-Commander Vex High asked. War Prime Gextal stared at the tactical display, showing the expanding sphere of electromagnetic disruption. Within that sphere, the greatest telepathic empires in the galaxy were falling apart as their communication networks collapsed. Send an emergency transmission to all Thakari forces, he ordered. Avoid human space at all costs. Any ship that enters the disruption zone is to retreat immediately. But even as he gave the order, War Prime Gextal knew it was too late. The electromagnetic pulse from New Busan was expanding at light speed, and human colonies were scattered across the galaxy. Soon, there would be nowhere for telepathic species to hide. "Sub-Commander, prepare a detailed intelligence report for the High Command," War Prime Gextal said. "They need to understand what we're facing. This isn't just about military conflict anymore. The humans represent an existential threat to our way of life." "What do you mean, sir?" Sub-Commander Vexhai asked. War Prime Gextal's compound eyes focused on the display showing human settlement patterns. "Look at this data carefully. The humans have been expanding across the galaxy for a century, establishing colonies and diplomatic outposts. Each settlement creates a zone of telepathic interference that grows stronger over time." He highlighted several star systems on the map. "These are regions where telepathic species have reported declining mental abilities over the past 50 years. We attributed it to natural causes or unknown cosmic phenomena, but now we know the truth." Sub-Commander Vexhai studied the pattern, and her mandibles clicked in realization. The humans have been systematically weakening telepathic species across the galaxy without even knowing it. And now they've created a weapon that can instantly expand that effect to cover dozens of star systems, War Prime Gextal added. "If they build more of these railguns and deploy them strategically, they could eliminate telepathic communication from the entire galaxy." The bridge fell silent as the full implications sank in. Telepathic species didn't just use mental communication for convenience. Their entire civilization was built around it. Their governments, their military organizations, their scientific research, their cultural development, everything depended on the ability to share thoughts instantly across vast distances. Without telepathy, the greatest empires in the galaxy would collapse into chaos within days. Billions of beings who had never experienced individual consciousness would be trapped in their own minds, unable to function in the complex societies they had built. War Prime Gextal made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. "Sub-Commander, send a priority message to all major telepathic species. The Vorthak Collective, the Zalani Empire, the Krill Federation, everyone." "What should the message say, sir?" Sub-Commander Vexhai asked. "Tell them that humanity is not just another spacefaring species," War Prime Gextal replied. "They are a plague that threatens the existence of telepathic consciousness itself. If we don't find a way to stop them, every telepathic species in the galaxy will face extinction." As the Thakari flagship transmitted its warning across the galaxy, War Prime Gextal stared at the expanding sphere of electromagnetic disruption on his tactical display. Somewhere within that growing zone of silence, human ships were hunting down his scattered fleet with weapons that had once been useless against Thakari defenses. The hunters had become the prey, and the galaxy would never be the same. Ambassador Do Yun stood before the emergency session of the Galactic Council, looking out at a chamber that had been completely transformed. The great circular hall that had once hummed with the quiet whispers of telepathic communication was now filled with the loud voices of hundreds of different species, all trying to speak at once. Where once there had been a single Zalani representative speaking for billions of drones, now 12 different Zalani delegates sat in the Empire's section, each representing newly independent populations that had broken away from Queen Zara High's control. The Vorthak collective seats were filled with dozens of individuals who were still learning how to think independently after a lifetime of shared consciousness. "The Council recognizes Ambassador Do Yun of the Human Federation," announced Council Speaker Vexhai of the Krill, struggling to maintain order without the empathic projections that normally kept the chamber calm. Do Yun stepped forward to the central speaking platform. Around him, hundreds of alien faces turned toward him with expressions ranging from curiosity to fear to barely controlled anger. Many of these beings were experiencing individual consciousness for the first time in their lives, and they blamed humanity for forcing this change upon them. Honored representatives, Do-Yun began, I come before you today to address the crisis that has affected our galaxy. But before we discuss solutions, we must first understand what has really happened. A low murmur filled the chamber as various species translated his words for their delegates who were still learning to communicate without telepathy. 3 days ago, a human weapon was used to defend our colony at New Busan, Do-Yun continued. This weapon created an electromagnetic pulse that disrupted telepathic communication across a large area of space. We have since learned that this disruption is expanding at light speed and has now affected over 100 star systems. Your species has committed an act of war against the entire galaxy, shouted one of the Vorthak delegates, his large, brain-like head pulsing with agitated lights. You have severed our connection to the collective. We demand that you reverse this effect immediately. Other voices joined in, creating a chaos of accusations and demands. Without telepathic coordination, the Council could no longer maintain the orderly discussions that had characterized galactic politics for millennia. Please, let me explain, Do-Hyun said, raising his voice to be heard over the noise. The electromagnetic disruption was not intentional. We did not know that our technology would affect telepathic communication. Ignorance is not an excuse, declared one of the Zalani delegates. Your weapon has destroyed our empire. Billions of our people have abandoned their duties and declared independence. Our civilization is collapsing. Do-Hyun waited for the shouting to die down before continuing. There is something else you need to know. Our scientists have discovered that the electromagnetic disruption is not just caused by our weapons. Human presence itself naturally interferes with telepathic communication. The chamber fell silent as the implications of this statement sank in. Dr. Jae-hyun stepped forward to join Do-Hyun at the speaking platform. As humanity's leading xenobiologist, he had spent years studying alien consciousness and communication methods. Honored representatives, Dr. Jae-hyun said, our research has revealed that human brains naturally generate electromagnetic patterns that interfere with quantum-entangled consciousness. This is the mechanism that underlies all telepathic communication in known species. He activated a holographic display that showed brain scan patterns from various species. Most telepathic species use quantum fields to link their minds across vast distances. These quantum connections are extremely sensitive to electromagnetic interference. The display showed a comparison between human brain patterns and the electromagnetic signatures of human technology. Humans evolved on a planet with intense magnetic fields and frequent electrical storms. Our consciousness adapted to use frequencies that create interference with quantum mental links. Council Speaker Vexhai leaned forward in her chair. Are you saying that your species naturally blocks telepathic communication? More than that, Dr. Jae-hyun replied. Our analysis of historical data shows that telepathic abilities have been gradually declining in areas with significant human presence. Every human colony, every human diplomatic outpost creates a zone of electromagnetic interference that weakens quantum consciousness links. A delegate from the crystalline Nexari collective raised a question through their light pattern communication system. How long has this effect been occurring? Dr. Jae-hyun consulted his data tablet. Since humans first left Earth and began establishing colonies. The effect is subtle but measurable. In some regions with large human populations, telepathic abilities have declined by as much as 30% over the past century. The chamber erupted in angry voices as the full scope of the revelation became clear. Humanity hadn't just attacked telepathic species with a single weapon. They had been unknowingly poisoning telepathic consciousness wherever they went. "This explains so much," said Elder Morvain of the Vorthak, his voice filled with realization. "Our deep space colonies near human settlements have reported weakening connections to the collective for decades. We thought it was due to distance or cosmic interference. Our hive mind coordination has been degrading in sectors with human diplomatic presence," added a Zalani delegate. "Drones in those areas have been showing signs of independent thought for years." Do-Hyun could see the fear and anger building in the chamber. These species were realizing that humanity represented an existential threat to their way of life, not through any malicious intent, but simply by existing. "There is more you need to understand," Do-Hyun said, trying to regain control of the discussion. "Our research into galactic history has revealed something disturbing about the development of telepathic civilization." Dr. Jae-hyun activated another holographic display, this one showing archaeological data from across the galaxy. "We have found evidence of dozens of non-telepathic civilizations that existed millions of years ago. Advanced species with technology comparable to modern galactic civilization, but without telepathic abilities." "What happened to them?" asked a delegate from the Mechanical Forge-born collective. "They disappeared," Dr. Jae-hyun replied grimly. "In every case, non-telepathic civilizations vanished from the historical record shortly after making contact with telepathic species. We believe they were systematically eliminated." The chamber fell silent again as representatives absorbed this information. "You're suggesting that telepathic species have been committing genocide against non-telepathic civilizations for millions of years?" Council Speaker Vexhai asked. "The evidence strongly suggests it," Dr. Jae-hyun confirmed. "Telepathic species had enormous advantages in warfare and coordination. They could communicate instantly across any distance, coordinate complex strategies without detection, and potentially influence the minds of their enemies. Non-telepathic species would have been at a severe disadvantage," Do-hyun added. "They couldn't compete with telepathic coordination and were eliminated one by one." "But humanity survived," observed Elder Morvain. "How?" Dr. Jae-hyun smiled grimly. "Because we evolved natural resistance to telepathic influence. Our electromagnetic consciousness patterns don't just interfere with telepathic communication, they make us immune to telepathic control." The implications of this statement created another wave of agitated discussion throughout the chamber. If humans were immune to telepathic influence, they couldn't be controlled or dominated the way other non-telepathic species had been. "This changes everything," said one of the Zalani delegates quietly. "Humanity isn't just another species to be incorporated into our empire. They're a species we can't control. And their very presence weakens our ability to control others," added a Vorthak representative. Do-hyun could see the fear in their faces. For millions of years, telepathic species had dominated the galaxy through their ability to coordinate perfectly and influence other minds. Now they faced a species that was immune to their greatest advantages and whose presence undermined the telepathic networks they depended on. "We need to find a solution that works for everyone," Do-hyun said. "Humanity has no intention of eliminating telepathic communication from the galaxy. But we also cannot accept demands that we alter our fundamental nature or abandon our colonies. Then what do you propose?" Council Speaker Vexhai asked. Do-hyun looked around the chamber at the hundreds of representatives, many of whom were experiencing individual consciousness for the first time. We propose that we work together to create a new kind of galactic civilization, one that respects both telepathic and non-telepathic consciousness, where different forms of awareness can coexist. And if we refuse? Asked a Thakari delegate who had just arrived from their distant fleet. Do-hyun's expression became serious. Then you will have to decide whether telepathic civilization is more important than galactic peace, because humanity will not surrender our right to exist, and we will not abandon the billions of beings who are discovering individual consciousness for the first time. The chamber fell silent as every delegate contemplated a future where the galaxy's oldest and most powerful civilizations would have to adapt to a new reality or face a species that could not be conned. President Sun-hee stood at the window of her office in the United Earth Government building in Geneva, looking out at the peaceful Swiss mountains while contemplating a decision that would affect the future of humanity and the entire galaxy. Her desk lay 2 documents. The first was an ultimatum from the Coalition of Telepathic Species, demanding that humanity either withdraw from all populated star systems or accept neural dampening implants that would alter human consciousness to stop the electromagnetic interference. The second was a military assessment from Earth's Defense Command, outlining humanity's chances if the galaxy's major powers declared war. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she said. Admiral Ji-won entered, followed by Dr. Yoonji and Captain Dae-hyun, who had just returned from a long-range reconnaissance mission to the Galactic Rim. Their expressions were grim, suggesting they carried important but troubling news. "Madam President," Admiral Ji-won began, "Captain Dae-hyun has brought back intelligence that changes our understanding of the current crisis." President Sun-hee gestured for them to sit around her conference table. "What did you find out there, Captain?" Captain Dae-hyun activated a portable holographic projector that displayed a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy. "Madam President, my team spent the last month investigating star systems on the outer rim, far from any current civilization. What we found was disturbing." The holographic display zoomed in on a series of star systems that showed signs of ancient habitation. "These are the remains of civilizations that existed millions of years ago. Advanced cities, space stations, and industrial facilities. But they're all abandoned and partially destroyed." President Sun-hee studied the images. "How many civilizations are we talking about?" "We found evidence of at least 47 distinct non-telepathic species that reached spacefaring technology," Captain Dae-hyun replied. "All of them disappeared from the historical record after making contact with telepathic civilizations." Dr. Yoonji leaned forward. "The pattern is consistent across all the sites we investigated. These species developed advanced technology, began expanding into space, and then suddenly vanished. In many cases, we found evidence of massive battles and planetary bombardments." "You're saying the telepathic species have been systematically exterminating non-telepathic civilizations?" President Sun-hee asked. "The evidence strongly suggests it," Captain Dae-hyun confirmed. "We found records in some of the ruins, ancient data storage devices that survived the destruction. The final transmissions from these civilizations describe attacks by coordinated fleets using weapons and tactics that match current telepathic military doctrine." Admiral Ji-won pulled up additional data on the holographic display. "What's even more disturbing is that we found evidence of neural control, weapons. Devices designed to dominate the minds of non-telepathic species and force them to fight against their own people. President Sun-hee felt a chill run down her spine. They turned non-telepathic species against themselves? It appears so, Dr. Yoonji said. Telepathic species have the ability to influence minds that aren't protected by electromagnetic interference. They could potentially control the thoughts and actions of any non-telepathic species they encountered. Except humans, Admiral Jaiwan added. Our electromagnetic consciousness patterns make us immune to telepathic influence. We're probably the first non-telepathic species they've encountered that they can't control. President Sun-hee stood up and walked back to the window. The implications were staggering. For millions of years, telepathic species had dominated the galaxy by eliminating any civilization that couldn't be mentally controlled. Humanity had survived only because they had evolved natural resistance to telepathic influence. There's more, Captain Dae-hyun said quietly. We intercepted communications from the coalition of telepathic species. They're planning a coordinated attack on all human settlements if we don't accept their ultimatum. How long do we have? President Sun-hee asked. 7 days, Admiral Jiwon replied. They're assembling fleets from across the galaxy. The Thakari, Empire, what's left of the Zilani forces, the Vorthak Collective's military arm, and dozens of smaller telepathic species. President Sun-hee returned to her desk and picked up the neural dampening proposal. According to the document, the implants would alter human brain chemistry to reduce electromagnetic emissions. Humans would retain their consciousness and free will, but their natural resistance to telepathic influence would be eliminated. What would happen if we accepted the neural dampening? She asked Dr. Yoonji. We would lose our immunity to telepathic control, Dr. Yoonji replied. Within a generation, humanity could be reduced to a slave species like all the others. Our children would grow up vulnerable to mental manipulation and domination. And if we refuse and fight? Admiral Jiwon consulted her tablet. Our chances are not good in a conventional war. The telepathic species have larger fleets and more advanced technology. However, our railgun weapons have proven effective at disrupting their coordination. If we could deploy enough of them strategically, we could expand the electromagnetic disruption zones to cover most of the galaxy, Dr. Yoonji finished. It would eliminate telepathic communication on a galactic scale. President Sun-hee sat down heavily in her chair. The choice before her was impossible. Accept the neural dampening and condemn humanity to eventual slavery, or fight a war that could destroy telepathic civilization across the galaxy. There's something else you need to consider, Captain Dae-hyun said. During our reconnaissance mission, we made contact with survivors. Survivors? President Sun-hee asked, surprised. Captain Dae-hyun nodded. Hidden colonies of non-telepathic species that managed to escape the ancient genocides. They've been hiding on the galactic rim for millions of years, afraid to reveal themselves to the telepathic civilizations. The holographic display showed images of various alien species that President Sun-hee had never seen before. They looked tired and fearful, but there was hope in their expressions. How many survivors are there? She asked. We estimate at least 50 billion individuals from dozens of different species, Captain Dae-hyun replied. They've been monitoring galactic communications and know about humanity's resistance to telepathic control. They're asking for our help. They want us to free them from hiding? President Sun-hee asked. More than that, Captain Dae-hyun said. They want us to free the billions of beings who are currently under telepathic control. The former Zilani drones who are discovering individual consciousness, the Vorthak who are learning to think independently, and countless other species who have been mentally enslaved for millennia. Admiral Jiwon leaned forward. Madam President, we're not just fighting for humanity's survival anymore. We're fighting for the freedom of every sentient being in the galaxy. President Sun-hee looked around the table at her advisors. Each of them understood the weight of the decision she had to make. Accept subjugation and preserve the status quo, or fight for freedom and risk destroying the galactic civilization that had existed for millions of years. What about our colonies? She asked. The civilians who just want to live in peace? We've begun evacuation procedures for non-essential personnel, Admiral Jiwon replied. But many colonists are refusing to leave. They say they'd rather fight for their homes than abandon them. Dr. Yoonji activated her own data display. There's one more factor to consider. Our railgun technology can be modified to create what we're calling freedom broadcast stations. Instead of firing projectiles, these devices would generate continuous electromagnetic fields that disrupt telepathic communication over large areas, creating permanent zones where telepathic control is impossible, President Sun-hee realized. Exactly, Dr. Yoonji confirmed. We could establish these zones around vulnerable populations, giving them the chance to develop individual consciousness without telepathic interference. President Sun-hee stood up and walked to a wall display showing Earth from space. The blue and green planet looked peaceful and beautiful, unaware of the galactic crisis that was about to engulf it. How many people know about this decision? She asked. The information is classified at the highest levels, Admiral Jiwon replied. But word is starting to leak out. There are protests in major cities demanding that we stand up to the telepathic species ultimatum. President Sun-hee made her choice. She turned back to face her advisors with a determined expression. Prepare a response to the coalition of telepathic species, she said. Tell them that humanity rejects their ultimatum. We will not accept neural dampening, and we will not abandon our colonies. And if they attack, Admiral Jiwon asked, then we defend ourselves and anyone else who wants to be free, President Sun-hee replied. Begin immediate deployment of freedom. Broadcast stations to all human settlements and any population centers requesting protection. She walked back to her desk and signed an executive order authorizing the military expansion of railgun technology. Admiral, you have authorization to use any means necessary to protect human civilians and liberate enslaved populations. Understood. Madam President, Admiral Jiwon said, standing at attention. As her advisors left to implement the decision, President Sun-hee remained at her window, watching the sunset over the mountains. In 7 days, the galaxy would learn whether humanity's gift of 1 year after the Battle of New Busan, Admiral Hana stood on the observation deck of New Geneva Station, humanity's first major space habitat, watching ships from hundreds of different species dock at the massive facility. The station was a marvel of engineering, built using technology shared by the many civilizations that had joined the Galactic Freedom Alliance. The galaxy had changed beyond recognition in the past 12 months. What had started as a desperate defense of a single human colony had become a liberation movement that freed billions of sentient beings from telepathic domination. Admiral, the morning briefing is ready, said Commander Jamin, her chief of staff. He was one of the new generation of officers who had come of age during the Freedom War, as historians were already calling it. Admiral Hana nodded and made her way to the command center. The briefing room was filled with representatives from species she had never seen before the war. Former Zelani drones who had developed their own cultures, individual Vorthok who had become philosophers and artists, and survivors from the ancient non-telepathic civilizations who had emerged from hiding. "Good morning, everyone," Admiral Hana said as she took her seat at the head of the conference table. "Let's start with the status report from the Freedom Broadcast Network." Dr. Young-ho, who now directed the Galactic Consciousness Research Institute, activated a holographic display showing the current galaxy. Large blue zones marked areas where Freedom broadcast stations had eliminated telepathic control, creating spaces where individual consciousness could develop freely. "We now have active Freedom broadcast coverage over 60% of the galaxy," Dr. Young-ho reported. "The electromagnetic fields are stable and showing no signs of harmful effects on any known species. Most importantly, we're seeing rapid development of individual consciousness in populations that were previously under telepathic control." The display zoomed in on various star systems, showing detailed statistics about population changes. "The former Zilani Empire has completely transformed. Instead of billions of drones controlled by a single queen, we now have over 3,000 independent governments representing different groups that have developed their own cultures and identities." "What about the Vorthak Collective?" asked Representative Keflo, one of the former Zilani drones who now served as an ambassador for her people. "The Vorthak have adapted remarkably well to individual consciousness," Dr. Young-ho replied. "They've become some of the galaxy's most creative artists and innovative philosophers. Their art and literature are unlike anything we've seen before because they're expressing individual experiences rather than collective thoughts." Admiral Hana smiled. The transformation of the Vorthak had been one of the most surprising developments of the past year. Beings who had spent their entire lives sharing thoughts with millions of others had discovered the joy of personal creativity and unique perspectives. "Any resistance from the old telepathic powers?" Admiral Hana asked. Commander Minji, who ran the intelligence division, consulted her tablet. "The Thakari Empire has retreated to the far rim of the galaxy, beyond the reach of our Freedom broadcast network. They're trying to rebuild their forces, but without access to enslaved populations, their military capabilities are severely limited." "What about Queen Zara High and the remaining Zilani loyalists?" "Queen Zara High controls about 12 star systems with populations that chose to remain in the hive mind structure," Commander Minji replied. "They've established a small empire in a region where we haven't placed Freedom broadcast stations, per their request. It seems some beings prefer collective consciousness to individual thought." Admiral Hana nodded. The Galactic Freedom Alliance had made it clear that the choice between telepathic and individual consciousness should be voluntary. They fought against forced control, not against telepathic communication itself. "Sir, there's something new to report," Dr. Young-ho said, looking excited. "We've made a breakthrough in developing voluntary telepathic communication that preserves individual consciousness." Admiral Hana leaned forward with interest. "Explain." Dr. Young-ho activated a new display showing brain scan patterns. "We've learned that human electromagnetic frequencies don't just disrupt quantum-based telepathy. They can also enable a new form of technological telepathy based on electromagnetic resonance." "What does that mean in practical terms?" asked Representative Vexnai, a former Kuril who had become a leading advocate for individual rights. "It means we can create communication devices that allow voluntary mental links between individuals while preserving their independent consciousness," Dr. Young-ho explained. "Instead of forced hive mind control, people can choose when and how to share thoughts with others." He demonstrated with a small device that looked like a metal headband. "This allows 2 or more individuals to share thoughts and emotions temporarily, but each person maintains their individual identity and can disconnect at any time. Admiral Hana was amazed. So beings can experience the benefits of telepathic communication without losing their individual freedom. Exactly, Dr. Young-ho confirmed. We're calling it consensual consciousness sharing. It's already being tested by volunteer groups from various species. The briefing continued with reports from across the galaxy. The Freedom Broadcast Network had created safe zones where newly liberated populations could develop their own governments and cultures. Former slaves were becoming leaders, artists, scientists, and explorers. Species that had been enemies for millions of years were working together for the first time. What's the latest from the archaeological expeditions? Admiral Hana asked. Captain Sunho, who led the historical research missions, activated another display. We've cataloged the remains of over 200 non-telepathic civilizations that were destroyed over the past 5 million years. The evidence of systematic genocide is overwhelming. The display showed artifacts and ruins from dozens of different species. But we've also found something remarkable: hidden archives containing the complete history and knowledge of these destroyed civilizations. Captain Sunho highlighted several archaeological sites. These archives were protected by electromagnetic shielding that prevented telepathic species from detecting them. The civilizations that built them knew they were facing extinction and wanted to preserve their legacy for future generations. What kind of knowledge are we talking about? Admiral Hana asked. Scientific discoveries, artistic masterpieces, philosophical writings, and technological innovations that were lost for millions of years, Captain Sunho replied. Some of these civilizations had developed technologies that are more advanced than anything currently available. We're working with liberated populations to study and understand these discoveries. Representative Keflo spoke up. My people are particularly interested in the archives from the Nathani civilization. They developed forms of art and music that express individual consciousness in ways the Zalani Empire never allowed us to explore. Admiral Hana felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The Freedom War had not only liberated enslaved populations, but had also recovered the lost heritage of hundreds of extinct civilizations. The galaxy was rediscovering its true history for the first time. Admiral, there's one more item on the agenda, Commander Jamin said. The formal opening of the Reformed Galactic Council. Admiral Hana checked the time. In 2 hours, representatives from over 3,000 newly independent civilizations would gather for the first meeting of a truly democratic galactic government. It would be the largest gathering of free sentient beings in galactic history. Any final security concerns? She asked. All clear, Commander Minji reported. The Thakari Empire sent a message declining to participate, but they've made no threatening moves. The remaining telepathic holdouts seem to be focusing on their own territories rather than interfering with the alliance. Admiral Hana stood up to conclude the briefing. Thank you all for your reports. In 2 hours, we'll witness the birth of a new kind of galactic civilization, one where every voice matters and every mind is free. As the meeting ended, Admiral Hana made her way to the Great Assembly Hall, a massive chamber that had been constructed specifically for the Reformed Galactic Council. The hall was designed to accommodate thousands of different species, with adjustable atmospheres, lighting, and gravity fields to make everyone comfortable. As she entered the hall, Admiral Hana was struck by the incredible diversity of beings taking their seats. Former Zalani drones sat next to ancient survivors from the galactic rim. Individual Vorthak debated with mechanical Forge-born representatives. Crystalline Nexari communicated with gaseous ethereals through translation devices. Every delegate was there by choice, representing populations that had freely elected them. There were no hive-mind queens controlling billions of votes, no collective consciousness speaking for entire species. Each representative was an individual with their own thoughts, opinions, and ideas about how the galaxy should be governed. Ambassador Do-hyun, now serving as the first Secretary General of the reformed Galactic Council, stepped up to the central podium. The chamber fell silent as thousands of different species focused their attention on him. Fellow sentient beings, Ambassador, Do-hyun began, his voice amplified by translation systems that converted his words into hundreds of different languages.